So again, my name is Ron Amenta. I'm a partner account manager for Miss Juniper here, covering the central part of the country. Been around in the wireless world for a number of years and seen quite a bit of changes here in that space, and nothing more interesting than what we have going on right now around this whole COVID-19 era that we're in. I certainly hope that everybody that's on the call here is staying safe and healthy through these challenging times. But again, thank you for joining. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in to the presentation and begin with kind of a little bit of a history lesson. I don't know how many people know essentially who MIST is and what we're about, but just a quick couple slides before we dive into the contact tracing components of this. But if we look at the wireless world and what has happened since we came to market, that amazingly enough is around the mid-1990s that Wi-Fi first hit the market there with companies like Aeronet, which was eventually purchased by Cisco. We look at inflection points that occurred during this process that might have changed the trajectory of the market. One of those certainly being when things became more mobile around the Centrino chipset being incorporated into laptops. And coincidentally, it wasn't too much after that we saw laptops started to overtake desktops in shipments somewhere in that 2003 timeframe. So we were becoming increasingly mobile there in those early 2000 timelines. Then what happened is we saw a bunch of innovation. Typically when a market starts to explode, we'll see companies invest in their next version of the secret way of addressing the challenges associated with it. So we saw companies coming to market with different technology sets like lightweight APs, like network cloud managed, certain antenna tricks that might have been done to address this exploding Wi-Fi market in that what we call Gen 2 space. In early 2007, we saw the introduction of what claim are the two biggest inventions of the century. That's not Ron Amenta that's saying that. That's actually VC types in Silicon Valley that claim that the smart device, when Apple came out with that in early 2007, and Amazon's modern cloud with AWS, again in early 2007, were the two biggest inventions here that occurred so far this century. And if we kind of fast forward to 2016, there really hasn't been any change in what's under the hood on those companies that we see down there on the bottom. There certainly has been some financial reengineering as acquisitions have happened, companies have merged, but what's under the hood with those different offerings is essentially the same, or we'll say 15 years old at this point, which is kind of unprecedented from a technology perspective. One more inflection point that we look at here is the introduction of Bluetooth 4.0. We actually know that as iBeacon and Eddystone from Apple and Google here at this point. And if we kind of combine this together, that's really kind of where MIST was founded, or what drove the foundation of MIST. One is to deliver a new wireless architecture based upon user experience, not about network connectivity or simple access, but about that user experience and how they're working with the wireless network. And also how we take Bluetooth and leverage that into this equation of user experience as well. We have a number of folks here at this point that are certainly jumping on board with MIST. Here, some pretty impressive names that many are familiar with, from the largest e-commerce company to Fortune 1. If we look at this, we now have a presence in almost all of the top Fortune 10 and certainly have been established as the standard for a number of those as well. So why is that happening? If we look at what the requirements are for a network today, one is it's got to be up and running 24/7, 365 because wireless is the primary transport medium. We also talk about programmability and complete automation capabilities because the staffs, that you guys currently are on, I'm sure are not adding additional staff to address the needs to deploy a contact tracing solution or the new edge for wireless for that matter. How do we get insights if somebody is having a challenge? If there is a new device that maybe hit the network that we want to deploy but isn't performing quite to the level that we want it to, how do we provide those insights on the user experience as opposed to just that network element like the AP being up or down? And then the other one is relevance. So allow me to engage from a customer standpoint in retail as we try to come back after COVID and not purchase everything from Amazon for that matter. How do we engage here to see workflows, workspace optimization, understand how patients and visitors are engaging in my hospital? So we do that here on these four things across the middle. One is client level visibility. So we talk about networks being up and running. We have a green light, but what is the experience here of those clients that we have? And what we are able to do with Mist is measure that performance. And if they're not meeting those performance metrics, like a cell boundary, like a throughput, or a time to connect or roam time, give me the tools to now troubleshoot what is that challenge that's coming up with that particular connection. And understand that that's going to be much, much more than just wireless. It's going to be wired. It's going to be device type and device OS. So we get deep client visibility into the hundreds of different things that can go wrong from a client connection standpoint. The other thing is we're fundamentally AI driven. So we can look at that client connection through those different lenses, look for anomalies, and do event correlations based upon machine learning across those to come back and say, the challenge that we have from a connectivity standpoint is not necessarily around wireless. Again, it might be authentication or DNS or a particular version of iOS that's actually causing that issue. We also apply that AI as well to support. So we look at support when you're calling this to be a level 3 help desk call, not a level 1. We're a little bit more like Netflix and Google or Facebook than we are the rest of the industry from a network solution standpoint because we run on the microservices architecture. This allows us, gives us tremendous agility, which means we can deliver solutions very quickly, much like the contact tracing offering that we'll be talking about here after we wrap up this slide. So again, coming to market with new technologies, new solutions here quite rapidly because we can update our cloud on a weekly basis. And the last thing here that we have is this digital engagement capability with something that we call virtual Bluetooth low energy, or VBLE. So because we have some unique hardware solutions as well as what we're doing from a modern cloud perspective, is now have this digital engagement capability around Bluetooth. So let's jump into this component here of business continuity with location capabilities. You know, we've kind of all been chasing this blue dot experience since wireless came out. It's been a challenge. You know, I think the expectation is that it's quite easy to deploy. We put out some radios and all of a sudden now we can trace somebody through our building, through the hospital. As we walk into the hospital, allow me to get to radiology here quite quickly, but it's a little bit more challenging than that because of a number of variables. Mist, and actually our founder, Bob Friday, here had developed a Bluetooth antenna array with 16 antenna elements on it that allow us to deliver BLE energy in 8 different directions. And with that delivery, we're able to simply bathe a location, a building, a hospital, a school with this Bluetooth low energy. We then apply machine learning on top of that to understand how devices perform, how they perform in the hand of people, what different devices come into the network, and learn more and more about them. As new Samsung devices come out, as new iPhone devices come out, let's understand and learn how they perform so that over the course of time, my location accuracy gets better. So this is a fundamental component of what we have on the hardware side that gets into what we have from a solution set perspective around proximity-based tracing. Kind of getting a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of what we have around this opportunity or to address the challenges with proximity-based tracing, we kind of look at who's in the game, who's responsible for what. So we start off with the government. Here we have the public institutions, the World Health Organizations, the CDCs that come together to try to see what is happening from, I suppose, an analog perspective and what's happening from a global standpoint. So we're now tracking what's happening across the different states and cities and countries and how that might, impact other locations or what they do from a policy standpoint to move forward with, that we're all quite familiar with, I'm sure, at this point. The other thing that we have here are technology companies like Apple and Google that are participating. All of these are on BLE. So again, going back to what Mist provides there uniquely around the virtual BLE solution here is leveraging those technologies that Apple and now Google are both delivering on their smart devices. Apple has released, if you've gone to 13.5.1, I believe it is, a proximity-based tracing opt-in capability there. And actually, based upon how that technology works, or based upon an app like we've now seen Canada deliver, you can actually download this today from the App Store, from Google Play, and now opt in to Canada's free exposure notification app. So that leveraging those technology partners that I was just talking about right there. So understand, looking at this a little bit deeper, is that It doesn't track your location. It doesn't give you name, address. It doesn't provide any health information there necessarily. But how it works, and then kind of fundamental to what we're talking about here from Mist, is that this application, from a Bluetooth perspective, is chirping, right? So we're seeing these random codes across the different nearby phones. So once we have all of these different things, if somebody then does come back and say, hey, I tested positive, now anybody that has that app that's been walking about, maybe exposed to that particular person that has tested positive to COVID-19, will be provided a notification, right? So kind of bring it together of what's available here from that level, and then we'll see how that works its way through what we provide here at Mist. The other thing that you guys have here, or your responsibilities are incorporated, whether it be a corporate enterprise or a healthcare institution, higher ed, K through 12, is how do we make sure that we're doing our job of taking care of patients? How do we do that in our brick and mortar? How do we then understand what's happening within my K through 12 building? Not only from who's staying healthy, but if somebody does, become a test positive person with that, what it means that I'm going to do to remediate that particular exposure, both from a where and a who standpoint. So clearly we want to get up and running here. But when we do, there's going to be a certain amount of caution around where COVID is and the long-term possibilities that exist with it. So allow us to have some kind of business continuity, give us insights in terms of what's happening here to reduce the impact of us staying up and running. And then for us, Mist Juniper, right, we are a market leader both in Wi-Fi as well as our unique BLE capability that allow corporations here and enterprises to reduce their risk of that COVID-19 startup here at this point in time. So that's going to obviously be the gist of what we're talking about here. So then we kind of looked at that from a macro and a micro standpoint. Now looking at this here from an enterprise IT perspective, and the things that you're actually being asked probably to address or look into certainly is what can we do here from a proximity-based tracing standpoint? How do we record what is happening there across my user community here and understand, like that app from Canada, but in an enterprise grade scale or a school scale, is to say, now we've had somebody test positive. Let me retroactively go back and see what kind of exposure has been generated by that person being here in the last 2 weeks or whatever that time period is. We'd also like to understand congestion and hot zones. We've all been going through that here as well. Certainly when we look to go out now, we've kind of loosened up a little bit, but we might have 25% occupancy or 50% occupancy in restaurants. We've been limited to go into a Home Depot here as they're doing their analog version of counting that. But now can we look at that and understand that from a network perspective and from a technology standpoint in terms of what's happening within my college campus, for example, or what's my count in these buildings, in these conference rooms, and let me then self-police that either from a user standpoint or those that might be responsible from a health and safety standpoint within my organization. So we all understand social distancing, maintain your distance. We've all got the little circles that we've been standing on now here for a number of months. Entry testing, what are we doing from an entry testing, whether it be temperature sensing as we walk in, or simply actually signing a form saying that I have not been sick, I had not run a temperature in the past 5 days that allow me to come into that building. Are there things that we can do to automate those processes as well, is always the questions. And then what is it that we need from tech, right? I'm sure that a number of people have gone to a number of these different sessions to try to understand what is available to address this. How do I address it is kind of an insurance policy, but also how can I address it to make sure that I maintain a self environment? Where within that spectrum do I exist, and what are the different components of technology that can help me address those elements? So digging into these use cases here for proximity-based tracing, there's 3 things that we kind of see right now. The first one we have is this user journey map. So let me understand what zone somebody has been in the building. And if it's not completely the building, that's certainly going to be helpful information. So we want to provide as much granularity as possible, understanding not just building entrance and exit, but help me understand what components of that building. Did I go into the cafeteria? Did I actually go into the gym or the locker room? Did I stay in the AP classrooms, or did I make my way through different other areas of that particular school campus? It's all going to be very helpful in terms of how we would address the remediation of that should somebody test positive with COVID-19. We do have some customers here that have talked about if somebody did that, then we would completely shut down the campus and everybody goes home for 14 days. Certainly not what we would consider, true business continuity out there, but give us that information now that allows us to understand zonal entrance and exit, where they have been and what amount of time they have been there. Certainly from a proximity-based tracing is now identifying who we've been next to, right? And what that timeline has looked like from an exposure standpoint. Do we have that technology here on the network side to say this person has dwelled in this particular area now for a certain amount of time, and while they were there, this is the people that they were exposed to. Now, when I say people, I'd be careful in that because, again, we don't expose actual username and addresses and health information. It's strictly from a metadata standpoint. But what we can do now is say these different devices were in that same area that this person that tested positive was. In the case of an enterprise or a school, it would be up to them to break that down in terms of who those actually are identified with, to do the alerting instead of the whole facility, but alert those individuals that were there next to that person that did test positive. And then congestion notification, right? What do we have from an alerting standpoint? Do we change from an analog, entrance hold there to a digital one? Can we do that based upon what current capacity is at, based upon a red, yellow, green, or allow us to even self-police from a user standpoint? We're in the green zone, fine, I'll enter. We're in the yellow zone, maybe I'll consider not going in here at this point in time, if we have that option in certain different enterprise use cases. So a quick look here in terms of what we provide, at NIST. And actually, I didn't introduce Jim. My apologies, Jim, to you, but your presence here is certainly the most important one to go through what this looks like here from an offering at NIST. This is a screen capture of what we have from a user journey mapping standpoint. And we can see here that we do provide that granularity to get zonal information, how that person has been, how long that person has been in those zones based upon the size of the circles, and then what this looks like over the course of the day. So in this particular user instance, we can see that this person has spent most of their time in customer support and quality assurance. If we know that they didn't go into the cafeteria, if we know that they didn't go into these varying conference rooms or the sales and marketing areas of this building, certainly valuable detail in terms of how we want to approach then what would be the cleanup portion of a positive test within our buildings. This is a look at proximity-based tracing. So here we can see an individual device going through those different zones, very similar to what we saw on the last slide. But in this instance now, what we're going to look at is a number of devices that have been nearby. And those devices that have been close by, we can see are represented by things like Galaxy A20, an iPhone XR, a MacBook late 2016. So not exposing that individual detail, but leaving that then to the folks like student health or campus security or HR then that can go back in and say, now we've had this person test positive. Let me see who was actually the owner of these devices and say, we see that you were near this particular person at this day and might have been in that area for a particular period of time. What we do with that is perhaps say that now you would want to, sit out here for those 14 days, quarantine yourself for a certain period of time. And then lastly, what we have here is this congestion alerting. You can see where we've now established a number for zones, the capacity of being 40 or 50. As we kind of work our way through that stack from 0 to 40 is now represent that here from a color standpoint, red, yellow, green. And then now what can we do with that from a reporting standpoint? When I say that we're an open system, completely programmable, that gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility now to take what we see in a dashboard. Dashboards are certainly nice, but let's take that information from the dashboard and make it actionable to users or to safety or whoever might need to play in this response team here around a positive test. The other thing that I would look at here too on the left is we have this ability to kind of see what dwell times are in areas, those zones, what the averages are, what the maximum was. This is all detail for Mist that we've had inherent in our system since we started. This was all relevant before here from a retail standpoint. I'd be very curious how many people are in HEB produce or the meat department. How do I work my way through an HEB store, for example? That's good detail for their sales and marketing people in terms of positioning or floor layout. So this is stuff that's existed for us since the beginning of time. Now we can take that and deliver it and wrap it around, these other solutions that we have, or package it up, I should say, for these other offerings that we have for addressing this COVID-19 challenge. I mentioned that we'd have this self-reporting or self-policing capability, and we do have that open system. And actually, here's a view of what we would have around a public venue dashboard. Certainly relevant from a college campus, perhaps any number of different verticals here where I can deploy a QR code. As I come up to it, put my camera up to that QR code, and then be presented with a map that will show me what those different occupancy dashboards are. I can look at that by floor, right? If it's a multi-campus, maybe if I'm just entering a campus here with multiple buildings, to say, now I see that cafeteria area or reception or the waiting area is quite full. The restaurant's full, I want to avoid that. But the conference rooms, the restrooms, thankfully, are showing on the green here in this particular instance. So if I can make my way to those safely, then I might be very happy. But at least I have that detail, so I can choose for myself in this particular instance how I might want to consume this particular facility. So getting a little bit more into detail about what Mist provides, we talked about us having that unique antenna array there for delivering BLE. We also provide Wi-Fi as well. So fundamentally, that wireless company, new architecture with Wi-Fi, and the new capabilities that we have around virtual BLE. So actually, Mist can look at this and address this particular challenge on these 5 different modalities. So one is the BLE app-based location. That would be doing something like we saw with the QR code, right? Or give me this app where I can now push out that detail to individuals to say, we are now at capacity in this building. We can also do that from a tag-based location or as a listening BLE, passive listener of BLE devices. So BLE tags have gotten to be very inexpensive, somewhere in the $10, $15 range now, that actually can enable individuals and carry them like employee badges, or take an employee badge and stick it into a sleeve that allows me to BLE-enabled employees. Now I can provide that visibility around there, leveraging the solution that we have here from Mist. And certainly we can look at location here from a Wi-Fi connected and unconnected. So really nobody else in the industry provides this capability all in one particular access point. Now, if we kind of look at those, there are considerations. We all understand that Wi-Fi is very pervasively delivered. It's very simple. We're all consuming it today. But what does that mean from a location accuracy standpoint? We're kind of looking at that maybe best case scenario of around 15 feet, depending on our AP density. So does that give us the granularity that we want to truly deploy, not some kind of insurance policy, but an actual very safe, healthy environment here? If it's looking at, we're talking 30 feet from a location accuracy standpoint. Not quite the detail that we're looking at or perhaps looking at here to address this. The BLE badge, as I mentioned, an ID badge that looks very much like an employee badge that we all carry, is always on. It is battery-based. It is going to give us better granularity, so very simple to deploy and relatively inexpensive here too. But that does tie me to an individual in this case as well. So Wi-Fi, if we look at that from a student perspective, could actually be multiple devices. Within a caregiver's world, it could be multiple devices from a personal phone, nurse phone, or nurse call phone. Perhaps some other different Wi-Fi devices, even like an Apple Watch could be components of that. But now with this BLE ID badge, we can tie that to an individual that allows us to then break that down and report back to those people that need to respond to a situation. And the last one here is this mobile app capability. So taking the Mist SDK, being able to write into that SDK, which now gives us a number of unique characteristics there. We start with the location accuracy, so we can get much more granular in terms of location around that. It does allow us that bi-directional communication as well. So this gets into that component of being able to take a picture of a QR code. It can then say, I see you, you're on campus, and do a push to me to say, hey, you're good to go. We're at 500 out of 1,000 here that are able to report. Actually, I'm near an oil and gas headquarters here in Houston. Their capacity of campus is 1,000. When I drive on campus, if my app is enabled here to support that, they can immediately report back to me saying that we're at 250 so far. And then obviously safety and security can monitor that at the front desk here as an option. If we look at this, in terms of what we can see based upon these different sources of information, we do have the opportunity to provide a real-time view. We can actually see, based upon Wi-Fi, who is in particular areas. Obviously, we need to consider that location accuracy around that as well. We can also see clients by zone. Going back to that Wi-Fi component of how many different Wi-Fi devices do we have on the college campus or by individual to know, what that true count is or how we might fudge factor, if you will, a little bit of what that might be based upon individuals carrying 3 or 4 Wi-Fi devices to say, we think, it shows 50, but then based upon that, we're going to say it's 25 in terms of putting those metrics out there. Congestion, where are my hot zones, red, yellow, green. Now we're getting more into that tag-based scenario where we get better granularity and we know which individual those are tied to. And then now taking that into this proximity-based tracing, who have I been next to, identifying exactly who these individuals are and who exactly they might be standing next to or having spent a considerable amount of time with, is going to get more into that tag or app-based scenario that we were looking at here on the last slide. And then, of course, the user journey. Site, floor, zone, get us very granular in terms of where this particular individual has been. So therefore, once there is that positive test, that can help me remediate his actual exposure throughout our campus. And then if we look at this by a product standpoint, I mentioned that Mist has been delivering a solution like that since our beginning. So these different elements that we have around the services for Wi-Fi, for asset tracking, where we turn that BLE array into a listening device, our user engagement, which is where we're taking advantage of the SDK and writing to an application, and then also leveraging Marvis, which is our virtual network assistant. All of these have been available that delivered certain features like real-time view, clients by zone, congestion, the ability to store that information for 30 days, look back, is what we have here in our baseline products. And then with Marvis and the virtual network assistant and our natural language interface, we can actually go in and say, find Ron Amenta's iPhone, right? Or say, find Ron Amenta or Ron's iPhone. And if there are multiple Rons with iPhones, is to be able to break that down very quickly to find out where they are and then start digging in further about what the journey map has been around that. Now, those components come within another service here that we call Premium Analytics. And that's where we get into more detail, more reporting capabilities, and then that ability to store this, or we store it for 90 days for doing that 90-day look back for you. All of this XY data is available to you in the cloud. It can be consumed your own way, a number of different ways, including even downloading it yourself into your own S3 bucket to look back if you want to from a retailer perspective for a year. But in terms of the solution set, what we're talking about today around delivering solutions for proximity-based tracing, this is what the different features or solutions that we have and what it can deliver to you. Just one quick note on data privacy and trust. As I mentioned, or as we were looking at that slide about what Canada was doing with their applications and taking advantage of what Google and Apple were doing in their phones, it's very similar for us. Right? We're not looking at personal information. We're not identifying the individuals here that are in our building. That is up to those folks that would be responsible for notification in a proximity-based tracing breakdown. So again, HR, health and safety within an organization, student health, whatever it might be. But from a Mist standpoint, we're only looking at this from a metadata perspective. We hold none of that detail from an individual, both location, address, ID, and then what their health status is. So at this point, going forward, why partner with Mist? We are cloud first. To deploy this, it requires no additional product to be delivered on-prem besides radios, right? So it would be a subscription service on top of those radios that would allow us to get the Wi-Fi coverage and the BLE coverage, but there's no additional boxes that would have to be deployed to address this on any one of the customers that have joined here today. We do provide BLE and Wi-Fi in a unique solution that gives us visibility into Wi-Fi connected, unconnected. We can listen for BLE devices. We can engage through an app on our smart devices, and we can also hear the passive BLE out there as well. AI allows us to do this at ease and with scale. So very simple to deploy this quite rapidly. Because we're doing unsupervised machine learning, we minimize or have no calibration here to get that location accuracy. And then we offer those unique reporting capabilities, that user journey map, that congestion reporting, that ability to do proximity-based tracing. Kind of closing it out here, I did want to talk about an actual solution that's deployed or at least partially deployed here at this point in time. Where there's been a lot of conversation around contact tracing. I think, again, you people have probably heard that have joined here a number of different pitches on this, but actually Mist has won the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, we all know as MIT, of course, and one of the players that's very much involved in delivering solutions around contact tracing and addressing the COVID-19 challenges. So we actually talked to them a very short time ago, really for the first time. They were in the process of upgrading a WLAN here, but that process was going to occur over the course of 18 months. Essentially, they were looking at refreshing before the academic year starts, fall of 2021. We were able to talk to them about just what I outlined there from a Wi-Fi and a BLE source of truth detail, and then came back and said that we want to actually upgrade our 9,000 APs here in time to have students report here in the fall. So they're right at this point around 3,000 APs in. Actually, this was a couple days ago, so they might be well on their way to 5,000 before the weekend or even more. And what they were really trying to address here, again, is more than just kind of checking a box and being able to tell people that we're kind of looking at this and we have some sort of an insurance policy, but addressing this from a true safety standpoint. So this taking advantage of all the different things that we're doing, and actually MIT was one that was very much involved in having Mist and working with Mist, given the ability or agility that we have to deliver new solutions, is around that QR code to do that reporting for entering a building on their campus. So they're consuming all of the different solutions that we have here, both in the form of access points and our Bluetooth antenna array, and leveraging those different subscriptions that we talked about. So with that, I've talked enough. Hopefully there are a few questions that have been posed out there, but I'm going to stop and turn over responsibilities to Jim Body, a Mist SC, who's been on board with Mist a number of years and actually been very much involved with location solutions being delivered in different verticals. But without further ado, I'll pause and let Jim talk a little bit more about himself and show this stuff in action.
Thanks, Ron. Can you guys hear me?
Can.
Cool. I got to figure out how to make me the presenter. Okay, I'm the presenter. See if I can start sharing my screen. Oh, it looks like I have to give it access to be able to do that. So stand by for a minute. Anyway, my name is Jim Body. I'm, as Ron said, a senior systems analyst here. I've been with the company since January of 2018, basically. So I've been on this journey from the get-go with folks here at Mist, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to share this with you guys. It looks like it's saying I'm going to have to leave the meeting and come back in order to be able to share my screen. Ron, you want to speak for a minute or two until I can come back in?
Yeah, this is Corey, and either Ron or I, yeah, while we're waiting on Jim to get back in here, if there are any questions for Ron, from Ron's presentation, we can kind of go through any of that right now. If you want to type those in, there's a Q&A over on the side, and see, and we can get those answered.
While Jim is doing that, I can also maybe look to steal a little bit of his thunder.
I think I'm back.
Okay, that was quick. All right.
Let's see if it lets me choose. Oh, this is looking good.
Awesome.
All right, are you guys seeing my screen?
We are.
Isn't technology grand? Well, thanks for your patience on that. Apologize for the little snafu, but we can get moving from here. So I'm going to jump into the demonstration here. This is a live view of our office in Cupertino, or actually an overlay of our office in Cupertino. We have some automated devices so that we always have something on this floor plan, but it is in the same building with our live offices. So this time of day, there would be other folks in there as well. And what we're going to look at today is kind of the components that Ron talked about during his part of the presentation that make up the MIST system. So what we're looking at right now is what we call the live view of a given floor plan that we have. And as I said, this is an overlay path of our office in Cupertino. And you can see a lot of different items that are kind of floating around on the floor plan here. So these purple looking heads are connected Wi-Fi clients. These blue heads are someone running an app with an integrated software development kit that Ron was talking about. And then these green items here would be those asset tags, which could be affixed to a piece of equipment or furniture, or things that you want to track the movement to. In healthcare, that's often a wheelchair or an IV pump or things like that. But they can also be a badge. A lot of companies, particularly with the advent of COVID-19, have come out with sleeves that can affix to, can slide your current badges, ID badges into, or have a sticky contact surface on them that give you that BLE capability on the backside. And also, if you've got near field communications for access to buildings through like an HID type of reader, HID actually does make combination badges that are not only near field communication for the typical access control that they have now, but it also incorporates a BLE into that as well. And I've got several customers looking at that for replacing the badges that folks are using now for access with a single badge that will also have the BLE built into them. You can see there's kind of some yellow areas on here. That's what we call our zones. So a zone is any kind of a polygon area that I can create on a map. So it allows you to get fine granularity into where these devices are on all the different modalities that Ron talked about here. So and then any type of a screen where I've got options that I can turn on and off for visibility. I would have this little, what I call the hamburger menu here, that allows me to toggle on what it is that I'm looking at. So I can now see the blue heads, that's app clients. I can also see whether those app clients now are connected via cellular or whether they're connected via Wi-Fi. So the ones that we were seeing were connected via Wi-Fi. So that's why they were the purple color. If they would have been connected via cellular, they would have been in orange here. The unique thing there with the MIST system is there's no requirement that you be connected to the infrastructure for the location-based services to work. You need an internet connection to send the data on what it's hearing up to the cloud, but you don't. That connection doesn't have to be through the infrastructure that's there on site right now. And in that regard, we do have what are really Bluetooth-only access points or arrays that we're looking at putting into places that don't have MIST currently, that want to do just the contact tracing. I'm working with a small school, advanced education school that's looking at doing that right now, to give all their students badges for access, to be able to track, the number of folks into those classrooms. So the other vectors or modalities that Ron talked about too is I can show unconnected Wi-Fi clients, and I can show just random BLE devices as well. So random BLE devices, what are those? The AirPods that I'm talking to you on right now would be one of those types of devices. My Apple Watch will show up as one of those devices. I've got a Bose speaker on my desk that shows up as a random Bluetooth device. Not a lot of value in tracking those because it's really hard to get the numbers from a Bluetooth device back to what does that mean from an occupancy basis. And similarly with the unconnected Wi-Fi clients, there's no way to get that back to the number of folks that are there. As Ron said, in a lot of institutions, you got to have 3 or 4 devices on per person now. Apple Watches that are the latest generation have their own Wi-Fi connection, as well as my laptop has a connection, as well as my phone has a connection. So I've got 3 right there, just walking around with me most of the time. But anyway, I can turn on and off what I'm looking at in this floor plan, and all of that information will be shown in real time. I'm going to just turn some of that back off again to declutter it. So we can see a little bit better on that. Come back here. They're getting a little slow responsive wise. Just in my browser, by the way, that's not on our system, but I've got too many screens open, and that's the browser is starting to complain. But anyway, that's kind of what you're seeing here. So as Ron said, lots of folks are looking at lots of different modalities that they're tracking and tracing to be able to get information on things. One of the things that we're tracking here that's most common is assets. As I said, utilizing a badge or a sleeve on a badge with BLE associated with it seems to be the most accurate, easiest to track thing. Doesn't require somebody to put an app on the phone, doesn't require that app to be active to happen. In the case of MIT, they actually are incorporating their COVID response into their MIT student and faculty app, which is required to get into the building, and it records the temperature of the folks and some health information when they go into the building, and then it takes attendance for them when they go into a classroom. So they have to have that phone app on their phone with them, and it has to be open for them to get credit for being there. So they've got some unique ways of being able to enforce that. Most folks don't have that luxury, so that's why most are trying to go with these badges. So I can pick a given badge, and I'm just going to go into another screen where I've already got that picked out. So that's the badge that we just looked at here. It's highlighted in this particular case. And I can go in and see what the location history of that particular badge has been over the either today or, for instance, the last 7 days. Now, this will take a moment to populate because it's actually going back and crunching that information in real time for that particular badge, and we'll bring out then kind of that user journey that we've seen. And I can get this information off our default system with just the basic licensing that we have here without our premium analytics, but it's only going to give me that information for the last 7 days and some other historical information for up to 30 days, but without the granularity that I get from our premium analytics. But what it will do is show me where that device is now, as well as what other areas has it been into. And then I can jump into any one of those areas and I can see what other devices have been in that area at the same time. But it's not going to give me that nice dashboard showing me the combination of those things in one. So that's what the premium analytics edition does for you with that regard. So I can dig in and get a fair bit of detail that way. I can also go into the BLE clients themselves, and I can do a search in here. I can look at either all the random BLE devices, and you can see all the different things that I show on the floor plan in that case. But I can look at just named assets. And those are asset tags that we're tracking and so forth. and I can come in here and say I want to find that somebody's badge, and now I can find exactly where is that device on the floor plan right now, and also get current information on it, and jump into it that way as well. So I can zoom in and see exactly where that person is right now, basically. So that's where that badge is at the moment. So I could look up things like that way as well if I wanted to find out where somebody is. As Ron said, I can also look that up through our virtual network assistant. If it's a connected Wi-Fi device, I can say, where's Ron right now? And it'll find any device with Ron in its name and tell you where that device is. So it gives you quite a bit of information from that perspective. The other thing that we've added in fairly recently is our occupancy analytics piece. So we already talked a little bit about you can create any kind of a polygon zone that you want on your floor plan. Once you've got those zones created and named, we have added the concept now of a capacity per zone. So I can go in and say this knock zone has a capacity of 20 occupants, capacity of 10 occupants. I've got 20 occupants in there now. That's why we're at 200% occupancy in that zone right at the moment. And you can see we've got the concept of color coding those, orange is if they're at or above capacity, and yellow if they're at 50% capacity, to see what's going on with that. You can see we set some of these very low just so that we could show those types of alerts. So basically all of this comes with the base MIST system. Everything I've shown you so far comes with the base MIST system, as far as I can import floor plans, I can create zones, I can track things in and out of those zones. I do have to have the asset visibility subscription turned on in order to get visibility into the Bluetooth stuff. If I want to also create an app on a phone, then I need that engagement analytics as well. But all of this would be there by default. And this is going to track, well, I'll show you how we set it up. But basically, it'll track any of those modalities in and out of those zones, keeping in mind that the resolution that we give you on the various modalities is better or worse depending on how they behave. So unconnected Wi-Fi is probably the worst case, followed by connected Wi-Fi, and those are just 5 to 10 meters. 3 to 5 meters on a badge. So we're not going to give you that. You've been within, 6 feet of this person at that time. This is zone-based analytics, as Ron said, to be able to, instead of closing down an entire building because I had somebody that self-reported as positive and saying anybody that was in the building in the last 14 days while this person was there better isolate. At least we can get it down to a floor. If that person was never on the second floor and you were always on the third floor, I don't have to worry about it. Or in bigger cases like this, I can do it on a zone level. So where this is set up, I've shown you already where you put in the capacities, but I enable that at a per site level under the occupancy analytics perspective. So I can say, the minimum dwell time that I want to count is this amount of seconds. So I'm not even going to count anybody that's in there for less than 2 minutes in this particular case. And that's obviously settable. I'm going to come back in just a moment to this public occupancy dashboard and analytics, but we can enable the notifications, and then those notifications can be sent via email address, but they also can be sent via a webhook. So when this is enabled, I can set up a webhook listener, and that can be any third-party application that can accept those types of things, which it will, in real time, every time somebody goes in or out of a given zone, it will send a notification on that. Or in this case, it's going to be sending those occupancy notifications about the capacity of each of those zones in real time. So it'll send when the zone gets to 50% capacity, and it'll send when it gets to 100% capacity or beyond. And I can decide what are the things that I'm going to track in and out of those zones. And we do some intelligent things from that perspective as well on the connected Wi-Fi piece. We filter out automatically things like printers that might be there 24 hours a day, 24/7. we automatically take those into account and remove those from the count so that you're not getting those fixed Wi-Fi devices. I've got a Nest thermostat on my wall that's one of those. I've got any number of those that are just static devices that are always there in my network. So those are taken out by automatically. This is the latest innovation that we've added, and it's really pretty wild to see. This is a public dashboard. It's used primarily for public venues. One of the first places that helped us to develop this was actually a large resort in the Middle East that was interested in letting their users be able to decide for themselves where they wanted to go get dinner by seeing how busy a given area was. So they can look at this occupancy dashboard and they can see that, oh, this, all you can eat buffet is pretty busy right now this time of night, but this hamburger place over here is not as busy. So they can decide to go into those places, or if they're going to feel comfortable going into those places based on the occupancy of it. And we can visualize this based on either the zone occupancy numbers, or I can just do a client density heat map. So what that looks like, basically, it'll create this URL. And if I open that URL, I'm going to get something that looks like this on my phone, basically, or on whatever device I've just opened that URL on. Now, obviously, a URL is not a horribly user-friendly thing to do, but I've got this brought up just to kind of show you what it will do. It'll let you see, in this case, what the capacity, where we are vis-a-vis capacity for all of these zones, and I can decide then if I wanted to go there. Another use for this would be like a shopping mall. If I've got arrive at a large mall, I live in Minneapolis, the Mall of America is here. I can actually have this done by creating a QR code that I can then print on a placard or a sign that goes in there. It says, scan this QR code, which you guys can do right now on your phones. If you want to pull up your phone, either iOS or Android should have the ability, if you take a picture of a QR code, it'll offer to open that URL for you in a browser. And you'll see exactly the same thing, or you should see exactly the same thing that I just showed you on the screen of your browser. So you should see this as well from that perspective. So hopefully you guys are able to see that. And this is one of the things that gets pushed out on a periodic basis. We update our cloud on a bi-weekly basis. It used to be weekly, but since COVID, we've shut it down and tightened it up just a little bit. We're only doing it once every other week. But these are new features that are added to the capabilities of Mist that don't require an upgrade, for the most part, to any software or firmware on the access points. We do the production push like we did last night on Wednesday night. On Thursday morning, as Ron was saying, just like Netflix, your new releases are there and for you to take advantage of. In our case, it's the new features that are there and ready to take advantage of. So this is one of the things that they just got working well over the production push last night. The last piece that I wanted to address with you guys was what Ron was talking about in our premium analytics. So like I said, everything that you've seen in here is basically just out of the box available. To track assets, you have to turn on asset tracking capability on a per site basis, and that's a subscription for the number of access points in that site. Same thing for engagement. If I want to engage with an app on a phone, that's a separate subscription as well. But it's all within the same housing of the APs that are out there. Our premium analytics is a completely separate service that we have offered, and we do that for a number of reasons. One is we can take that longer view of the data and apply some better reporting engines on top of it to give us a better view. The other advantage that has is that's not the same login as you have for all of this, because this is really, the Mist dashboards are primarily an IT-based thing, right? They're for information system folks to manage the Wi-Fi and all of that. Whereas you maybe don't want to have your IT folks have visibility into the information that ties that number to a person. So these logins could be for the security folks and for the um, HR folks as well. But basically, this is that journey mapping that we talked about. So this is going to say, first off, they're improving this all the time, and I can now pick how many days in the past I want to go back to. I can pick which site it is. I can say what's the minimum length that I want to see exposures tied to, and then I can decide what kind of a source it is. So that's Wi-Fi connected, unconnected, the badges, all of that. Or I can look for a specific badge that I'm tracking on with that. So in this particular case, we're tracking on a given badge. And these are all the zones that they've visited, and the dots represent every 15 minutes in time where they were. As I go down here, I'm going to see who else was in that same zone, how many other people, for how long, and what's the total occupancy of that zone by those folks. And then as I scroll down here further, I can also see who else was in that area for how long during those times, to see what the exposure is, to contact those folks and let them know you were in the same area with someone who's reported positive for this period of time on these days. Please self-quarantine. And plus, this also is going to give us the opportunity to go in and deep clean those areas very specifically from a maintenance perspective. And then the compliance for those occupancy capacity issues as well are available here too. The last piece of it that I need to get to really quickly, because I've got an engagement immediately up against this, is what we have done for ServiceNow integration. So ServiceNow already had their applications made available to their folks for safe workplace app suites that included things like health screening and so forth. They were tracking folks as they came in and out of the building. If you had scanners at the doors for folks, and they were also watching where people were going into meetings, but they didn't have a way to know for sure if you were in the room where the meeting had happened or if you actually were, attended remotely and so forth. ServiceNow is a major customer of ours globally. So we came to them and said, hey, we've got this capability. They actually integrated it right into their dashboard so that they're able to then go in and report directly on this within their dashboard as well. And this is a part of their HR service delivery modules that it's integrated right into. That's about it for me. That's about all the time I've got as well.
Thanks,
Ron,
Jim.
can you handle?
Yep.
Can you handle questions if I need to jump?
Absolutely. I'm still available to hang on here. I know we are coming at the top of the hour, and other folks might have obligations here as well. One thing I'd like to close with is, we're certainly available to come in and answer questions afterwards or take a deeper dive with you, as is, Corey and team. The other thing that I'd like to illustrate here real quick is what we've seen there is very much a usable solution once COVID-19 is solved for us with this. Things like nurse workflows or student safety situations where a police force could be given an iPad to see where people and situations are in buildings here as well. So this does translate quite nicely to other different service offerings and solutions that can be delivered based upon that XY information, all available to be ingested here into a number of different systems or used a number of different ways. So we certainly appreciate, again, everybody showing up here, giving us an extra minute or two here too, and staying the whole time. Corey, I'll turn it back over to you, but I am available to answer some additional questions should you have any.
Ron, I appreciate it, and tell Jim that we thank him for going through the demo with us. There is an ability to raise a hand. I don't want to keep anybody too long if you've got to drop off, but you can do a raise hand over on the left if anybody has any questions, and we can unmute you and you can ask your question now. We will be following up with an email at the end of the webinar with contact information, and as well as we will be making this link to the recording available to you guys as well. I know we've had a couple of questions around that in relation to sharing with staff and that kind of thing. If we'd like to take a deeper dive into this, maybe more on a specific basis around your entity, whether it be school or enterprise, and how you guys might implement this. We'd love to visit with you further on that, and we can get in touch over that. I don't know. Doesn't look like there's any questions from what I can tell.
I'm not
So
seeing
with
any.
that,
Yep.
yeah. So with that, I guess we'll wrap up. We appreciate the time today. Again, EdgeTeam Technology does look like somebody's raised their hand. Maybe, no, that's false. Yeah. So we appreciate the time today. Thank you, and you guys have a good weekend. Stay safe out there, and we'll be in touch soon.